Okay, I'm calling the Finance Committee meeting of February 2, 2012 to order at 7:03 p.m. We'd like to welcome everybody who's here. Thank members of our town staff from the Conservation and Development Department who are here, and appreciate your participation in our budget review process very much. And I want to thank everybody who's watching from home on Amherst Media for their interest in the Finance Committee and the operation of town government. The first item on the agenda I placed very purposefully is the Conservation and Development Department, and wanted to start by asking Director of the Department, David Zomek, to give an overview of issues that he wants to highlight about the budget. I wanted to just advise the committee that because of a conflict, Mr. Zomek is going to have to leave about, as I understand, 7:45, and so that if there are questions pertaining to the department in general or to the conservation function, that I would like to make sure that they are posed in a timely fashion so that we can accommodate his schedule. And I also wanted to, as the meeting has now commenced and we're in Amherst Media, to recognize and thank you for your work during the fall when you threw yourself in unexpectedly as acting town manager and continued to fulfill your other duties on behalf of the department. And we who are on citizen committees that watch town government know that the town continued to function extremely well, and we appreciate all of your efforts and what you did to allow that to happen.
Thank you very much for your kind words, and it was my pleasure to fill in for John Musanti, and we're happy to have him back at full steam, and off we go into FY13.
Which is what we should talk about.
Great. With that, thank you very much for having us here tonight. I'm joined by my colleagues, Jonathan Tucker, Director of Planning, and David Waskiewicz, who is our Acting Building Commissioner at this time. And we're very pleased to be with you tonight. And what I thought I would do is give a brief overview. We're going to try to keep this brief. And I have some flexibility. I did check with the chair of the CPAC, so I don't feel rushed to get upstairs to that meeting. Peter Jessup was very kind to work with his agenda as well. So please don't feel rushed. I will stay as long as need be and get us through any questions you might have. I want to just say a few opening remarks about the functional area that we're talking about tonight, conservation and development, and then I will turn it over to my colleagues to talk more specifically about planning and inspection services. And again, we've always had a very engaging conversation with the Finance Committee about our budget and about the work we do, and I hope we can have that tonight. And we welcome specific questions about, obviously, the finances and the dollars and cents. Most of my comments are going to be about trends and about where we see our functional area going. So very briefly, I want to talk about conservation, planning, zoning, and inspections, and I'll mix and match a little bit, but all of those areas have some exciting things happening, and we're looking forward to FY13. In terms of focus areas for the upcoming fiscal year, many of the things that we started or have started during FY12 will be continuing into next year. Obviously, one of the big things we continue to work on is consolidation, the consolidation of those areas of conservation, planning, zoning, and inspections, and a bit of community development through the CDBG program. We've achieved a lot of the successes that the former town manager laid out for us, and now John Musanti is laying out some new initiatives for us. And all of those have to do really with efficiencies for our departments, but also efficiencies for the citizens who utilize those departments. Looking at contractors, developers, the boards and committees that we serve, trying to be more efficient with the resources that we have. We've made great strides on our team approach to permitting, working with fire, health, and the departments that we have on the second floor here. We're continuing to work with our IT department to make the relatively new to us Munis database program work for us, and that's an ongoing process and will continue in FY13. We're even looking at things like electronic filing. Are there opportunities out there to utilize the technology to bring in some ideas with regard to routine filing of permits? Can some of that be done electronically? Some other communities are using it. Certainly it's something we're going to look at hard in FY13. Coordination of overall project review. We're doing more and more teamwork with fire, with health, with obviously inspections, zoning. I think the Lord Jeff project and the Boltwood Place project are two examples of how we did that quite well this fiscal year. Both projects, the Lord Jeff just recently reopened after about a 2-year hiatus, and the Boltwood project is moving along well, as everyone can witness out to our north in the Boltwood section. But bringing together the permitting departments that are responsible for the various aspects of each of those projects, getting them in early, getting them with the project designers, with the engineers, with the project managers, in one case from the college, in another from the private sector, and trying to keep those projects on schedule and on task from our perspective. What happens out there with with financing, things like that sort are beyond our control. But what we can control are the plan review and trying to make sure that they are getting before, if they need to get before a board or a committee, that they're doing that in a timely fashion, and that we're doing everything we can to move that along. I think Jonathan will talk a little bit about the CDBG profile. We're continuing to work on the redistribution of some of the staffing responsibilities within CDBG. Undoubtedly, there will be questions about staffing there, and I think he can go into more detail. But Mr. Rosenblatt, as planned, and as we talked about with you in the past, Mr. Rosenblatt has officially retired at this point, and he was with us and provided wonderful support and institutional memory on the CDBG program for quite a while, and was working just 10 hours a week with us recently, and January 31st was his last day. So we're very fortunate to have had him that long, and now many of his responsibilities have been transitioned to Nate Malloy. And I think Jonathan will talk a little bit more about that, and that's reflected on our org chart under Community Development Planner. Projects and initiatives, continuing implementation of the master plan, and I think Jonathan will talk more about some of the zoning initiatives that are on the docket here for town meeting and the various committees. Again, with an emphasis on infill projects in downtown and village centers. The new science center at Amherst College will undoubtedly kick off in the new year and in the new fiscal year, and that will be a project of great focus for inspection services and primarily inspection services and fire. $120, $130 million project, one of the biggest, probably the largest project the town has seen, because we don't get into that kind of specificity with the university on their projects, but the building department will be very involved in that large project, and that will be kicking off. Many new restaurants and new businesses coming to town. We've seen a nice influx of those, and there are many more working through the permitting process. We'll talk a little bit about the support for the Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods initiative that's being coordinated by Health, by Julie Fetterman, our Health Director, but there are many components where our zoning staff, our inspection staff, our planning staff will interact with that, and the focus there is really on many of the single-family homes and the rental units in town, and the town manager has talked quite extensively about that. In relation to that, we've in FY12 town meeting funded a new position, a local inspector position, local inspector / code enforcement. We're poised to bring that person on board. It has taken a little bit longer than we had hoped, but often search processes do take longer. So we're poised to bring that person on board, and I think the town manager will have more, an update on that for the select board next week. We also brought on or hired an energy sustainability coordinator. Stephanie Ciccarello moved from her position as the wetlands administrator over to that position, and we hired a new wetlands administrator. These are both part-time positions, and Stephanie is hard at work on getting ready to submit the Green Communities grant, which we talked about at town meeting. And it's actually a much larger project than I thought, but that will make us eligible for a number of state grants to increase our green profile, if you will. Finally, I wanted to call your attention, and then I'll turn it over to Jonathan and Dave. We have always tried to come with you the past couple of years with an update on grants and milestone projects that we're working on. I have before you the latest update to that. I don't want to go into that in detail. I'm happy to answer questions now or in the future on that. There is a one-page summary right with that is in green and two other colors. And I would just call your attention to the left-hand column, which summarizes in chronological order with the most recent to older grants, the kinds and numbers of grants and the dollar figures to the grants that we've helped secure for the town. Overall, our number since 2008 is total funding is $3,303,000 and change. Most recently, our department was instrumental in working with DPW and LSSE to secure the $208,000 park grant for the War Memorial Pool project. So we're continuing to work to try to get grants of all kinds. You can see a nice spread here of the kinds of grants. I would just call to your attention whether it's a park grant for War Memorial Pool, the $1 million CDBG grant comes through our office. We got an urban forestry grant recently to continue our inventory of street trees, to work with the Public Shade Tree Committee. And then again, we continue to work on open space projects, and we've been very successful at getting grants for open space. So all of those things kind of represent the range of projects and initiatives that our functional area is working on. I'll stop there, pause, and take questions, or let Jonathan and Dave follow up, and then we can pause for questions.
Any initial questions? How would you like to have the others speak briefly and then get the questions?
I think so, if you wouldn't mind.
No, that's fine.
Allow me to sort of repeat some of the themes that Dave has hit on. Although everything is always new, not that much is changing other than new things. For FY13, we have the same pattern of programmatic activity. There's not a great deal of budgetary change. As was described in our block grant program, our community development program, we have seen some personnel shifts, but we still end up with 2 people doing the same kinds of work that they were doing before. Our community development coordinator has retired. Our former associate planner, now community development planner, is going to assume those responsibilities, and a part-time housing planner will be brought on board during this fiscal year to pick up the responsibilities the associate planner was doing before. So we're ending up in the same place, even though desks are shifting around in chairs and so forth. The workload generally for planning portion of this functional area can be roughly described in 5 categories: master plan implementation, town sustainability projects, the new Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods initiative of the town manager, which focuses on rental housing in Amherst, our community development project work, and the elephant that's always in the room, which is board and committee support, staff support and assistance, which let me just, one of the things we also always do is hand out a new list of boards and committees and other groups that we staffed out. Oh, sorry, I'm going to pass that around. We've added a few this year. That seems to happen. Under master plan implementation, as was described, we are engaged in a village center rezoning effort for North Amherst and Atkins Corners. The Gateway project, which now also encompasses or seeks to encompass the town center, since the Gateway project is essentially an extension of the town center, is also percolating along. We are awaiting the completion of a prospective housing market study before we proceed to final visioning and new zoning for that project. The village center rezoning is currently being worked on by the zoning subcommittee of the planning board, and we anticipate bringing some portions or all of that back to the spring town meeting for town meeting's consideration. We are currently working with consultants to develop the program for remapping our flood-prone areas. You will recall that our flood-prone conservancy district and flood maps are profoundly out of date and are in need of updating. And that process, working with our IT department, specifically our GIS coordinator, is underway. We just began a new process spurred by the encouragement of the planning board. A new transportation plan task force consisting of 6 representatives of town boards and committees and staff is going to be developing requests for proposals for a consultant to help the town develop a transportation plan as an element of the master plan. So that's a new, yet another new way in which we're going to try and knit all of the community's intentions together. There are also, with the advent of the downtown business improvement district, the town has also been engaged over the years and maintains contact with regional economic development entities and are inching toward the development of an economic development plan. We're not quite sure how soon that will occur, but we are moving in that direction. Under town sustainability, and that's just some of them, I'm just hitting highlights here. Under town sustainability projects, we have the projects that are already underway: the Hawthorne Meadow Recreation Area, Kendrick Park, Hoffer's Pond. We also have the old landfill solar farm project, which we anticipate, once it has reached a state of fruition, will move forward again fairly soon. We have been involved now for 2 years and continue to be involved in both a regional and interstate project, the Central Corridor Rail Project. In fact, tomorrow afternoon I'm going to be down in Norwich, Connecticut, meeting with a steering committee of representatives from communities and institutions along the New England Central Rail line, trying to have that become the next new knowledge corridor project in terms of funding and so forth, so that Amherst passenger rail can be sustained even if the Vermonter moves across the river to the west side of things, and just as part of a responsible regional passenger rail system. Under the Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods Initiative, there are many moving parts to that. One of the principal ones that you're going to be seeing fairly soon is new coordinated levels of code enforcement, particularly once the code enforcement agent comes on board, but it's already begun because of the levels of coordination Dave was describing on projects and other efforts. We're starting to refocus those kinds of efforts on enforcement in terms of the regulations having to do with rental housing in Amherst. And with building, zoning, health, fire, and police, and in particular with a code enforcement agent who has the ability to both enforce building code issues and health regulations, we believe we're going to be in a much stronger position to have a safer rental housing stock than we do now. We're also in the process of developing new regulations. You will see some of those, both proposed amendments to the general bylaws and proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw this spring, and there will be more in the fall. I mentioned before the studies. We have the prospective housing market study. There's also, under our block grant funding, a housing production plan study that's underway, and an affordable housing inventory that will be underway soon. For all of that, we are going to require ongoing community outreach. This is going to be, in many ways, something Amherst has not experienced before, at least at this level. We have always had challenges with rental housing. As soon as 1820 rolled around and we started, and Amherst College was built, people were boarding students near the campuses. It has now reached a point where we are beginning to see serious conversion of neighborhoods into rental areas all over town, not just near the campuses, and that is something that needs to be addressed. The community needs to talk about that as both regulations are proposed and new levels of enforcement occur, and those who are doing the rental activity begin to complain about the levels of enforcement. It's going to be a substantial community effort and conversation to have about what direction to go on this. We mentioned block grant projects. Olympia Oaks affordable housing project. It's only taken us since 1986 to get that really truly off the ground. That's our usual Amherst speed. We're hoping to break ground this coming fall. We'll see. It's moving right along. We have the ongoing service provision that goes through the block grant, and we have also ongoing affordable housing production studies, examination of properties, and so forth. And finally, again, the elephant in the room, you can see the number of boards and committees we support. You can see in the mission statement the number of meetings that occur a year, and that counts you guys. So, well, I think I'll turn, at that point, turn it over to Dave. This Dave.
Oh, okay, thank you. A lot of what I was going to talk about has actually been covered at this point, so it'll keep it real short, which is good, I guess. One thing we saw over the course of the past year is the expansion of Atkins, which is the first phase of, I believe there's 2 more phases, so that'll be forthcoming in the coming year. As mentioned, Lord Jeff is finally finished, which is a nice addition to have that back online again. Without naming any names, because there's so many of them, there's been at least 7 restaurants that have come into town or have renovated spaces or have new life, so that we can see that happening right now. There's another 2 at least that are in the process that should be getting finished very shortly. Boltwood Place, as mentioned, is supposed to be done sometime by mid to end of March, so there'll be another 12 apartments, and we're not sure what the commercial space is on the first floor yet, so that's yet to be determined. The Amherst College Science Building, at this point, I don't know when it is going to start. I haven't heard, but like Dave mentioned, it's pretty substantial in terms of plan review and the amount of time that we probably have to spend on this. You're dealing with all kinds of different labs and chemicals and things like that. That's not your common everyday thing that we deal with, so that in itself would be a little exploration on our end of things.
Can I just ask a quick question about that?
Yeah.
I mean, does that mean there'll be an extra line item in the inspection services budget for consult? I would think that you would need some measure of outside expertise for that kind of a technical, complicated, humongous building.
It's
certain systems, at least.
If I could, it's something we've talked about with the town manager and with Sandy. There's a couple of different ways to do it. You know, the first question is, do we have the staff to do it? It is going to be a very intense process. And the second possibility is to bring on another party to do that, outside consulting. The third option is to work with the applicant to see if there is some hybrid of the two, that in fact there are ways for the applicant to provide a third-party review that we could accept for such a project. And I think those are the directions we're looking at right now. I don't believe there's anything currently in the FY13 budget added to account for additional staff. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks.
Yeah. But along with the commercial growth that we've seen, or renovations that we've seen, there really has been a substantial drop in the housing in terms of new homes and things like that. We've probably had maybe about 3 over the course of last year. I haven't seen any plans coming in for future at this point, so that's kind of slowed down. But I would say in general, our workload is picked up in terms of permitting and that kind of thing. We're certainly busy. And to add to all the fun for last year, in 2011, we've experienced, this is where all the code changes occurred. We're now in the 8th edition building code, which became official for everybody in July. That's for commercial work. Residential already existed. And along with that came 2 books of amendments to go with your commercial code and your residential. So we've got 300 pages that we have to review and another 290. So as you're looking through your building code, you're also looking to see if there was ever an amendment for that. So that's something that we have to do. In previous code edition, they had put that in there. It was called in so that you could, it was right next to where you were looking. Now you have to look for it. So that kind of adds to our plan review time a little bit. The code is not changing. They're saying until probably 2015 at this point. So at least we can learn it, get used to it until the next one where we have to get used to it again. Another change that the state made is in February of 2011, there was a requirement that anybody doing sheet metal work needs to get licensed. They also need to get permits, building permits, which they never used to have to do because it usually corresponded with a building permit that was occurring. So if somebody's putting in an HVAC system in your house or in a commercial building, they need to be licensed, they need to submit a set of plans, they need to get a permit for it, and we have to review it, issue it. So there really wouldn't be any increase in the revenue. It's just increased our workload because we still have to inspect it. Now we're issuing another permit where before we didn't have to. Very little change in terms of that. And one of the last changes, which you've probably noticed in the paper recently, is the stretch code for Amherst has officially started January 1st. So that's another learning curve on our end, as well as the contractors and the community out there. What does it mean to everybody? So we're working on trying to educate everybody at this point, and then, but that's another aspect of our job that has changed. Doesn't necessarily change anything in terms of our inspections because there's supposed to be a third-party inspector involved with that, but it does in terms of having to review information and gathering information, more paperwork for us that way. But that, so far so good. It's been moving along pretty well. So, and then we still continue to meet, as Dave has mentioned, with the other departments on a bi-monthly basis to review plans, permits, issues. It's been working very well, I think, in terms of communication. So that's been very positive. So that's it.
Okay.
I had a question about committees. 2 of the new committees seem to have come directly out of the master planning process rather than being citizen initiatives. Being the master plan implementation committee, who's on that? Who's represented on that? Is it a staff committee or are there citizens on it or what?
That is a committee that is to be appointed by the select board. The select board is considering that, and this is a list for FY13. We are anticipating that that committee will be there. Their intent under the master plan is to sort of track progress on the master plan and not so much direct what's going to happen, but say to this or that department or board or committee, were you aware that the plan calls for you to do this and such over a certain period of time? How's that going? Kind of thing. And then summarizing it on a regular basis and keeping the citizenry informed about how far along the plan is going. The other new one.
And do you have an idea, a sense of, will it have representatives from the planning board, or is this entirely up to the select board to appoint it? I'm trying to figure out how, if you have too many committees already that you're staffing, and there are 2 more committees appointed that have to do with planning, where's the impetus for that coming from?
That, in both cases, in the case of the Master Plan Implementation Committee, in the case of the Transportation Plan Task Force, which is a response to the need to do a plan, both of those came from the planning board, from citizens. appointed who saw the need in the context of the other work that was going on. We also, staff are involved with another couple of committees. One of them actually isn't on here, but there's under regional groups on the upper right-hand side and Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, there's a new Sustainable Transportation Task Force. The Department of Housing and Urban Development of the federal government has created a planning unit out of the Connecticut River Valley, and they're calling it the Knowledge Corridor, so that it matches up with the other things that are happening in that area. And one of the many pieces is a sustainability effort, and that is transportation. And in part because people made regional rail choices without involving us, we're making sure that we're in there with our oar in the water and making sure that the changes don't occur around us without our say-so. So that's where that one comes in. We're also involved, and it's not listed here, we have staff serving as liaison to some of the regional economic development groups. Groups that, for instance, vet potential industries coming in, and emails will go around saying we have a person who wants to do this and such a kind of thing, they need this many square feet and so forth. Do you have that in your town? That kind of thing. It's a networking effort for the most part.
Okay.
I'm just back to these committees, because I know this has been a sore point every year, that there are more and more that this department is being staffed to, but at least the addition of these two does not, I don't know how in the world we're going to control it if the process that we're going through requires committees to do it. Yes, Dave?
If I could, I think it's, it's a great line of questioning. I will point out, I believe the task force has a clear beginning, middle, and end.
Right.
So that's about an 8-month process, is that correct?
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be an ongoing committee. It strikes me that it's not unlike when the Conservation Commission worked with the Select Board on the Puffer's Pond 2020 committee, which was an 8-month study group that came together, did their work, similar to the Kendrick Park group, came together, made recommendations, gathered information, made recommendations, and then they essentially go away in the hopes that a product comes out of that. And a product did come out of the Puffer's Pond group. There was a report on the Kendrick Park plans, and that's really awaiting funding. So some of these can be, for a period of time where we ramp up and the committee ramps up and then comes back down. I guess I would characterize it, if I could, as I think what we've tried to do through these organizational charts that we're very proud of is getting the acknowledgement, Kay, I think has been very important for the staff, getting the acknowledgement from the Finance Committee, from the Select Board, and ultimately from the town meeting in the support of our budget. From where I sit, and I believe Jonathan and Dave would agree, that some years ago there wasn't even the acknowledgement that all of these committees existed and were getting support from our various departments. So in part, I feel much better over the last few years that we're getting that acknowledgement and we're communicating in the form of documents like this grants and milestones document to show why is it that we have, a planning director, a senior planner, 2 senior planners, and a community development planner? Why is it that we have that? Well, in part because the community demands it and wants it, and in part, what are the results of having wonderful staff like that seeking and securing over $3 million in funding? But equally important is what we didn't get. In the last 3 or 4 years, we've attempted to get something on the order of $8 to $10 million, and so you can't seek $10 million worth of grants unless you've got the staff to go out there and get it. With all due respect to volunteer citizen boards and committees, typically they're not the ones who are going to go, in this case, after this kind of funding. And the funding, as we all know, federal and state funding is getting tighter and tighter, competition is greater and greater, so you need the skilled staff who have the experience doing that, and we have a pretty good track record here just since 2008 in doing that. So that's one example, and we appreciate the acknowledgement from the Finance Committee, from the Select Board, from the Town Manager, and from Town Meeting ultimately, that there's real value in having these staff members. So that's my...
Maybe if I follow that up for a second, if you don't mind. You've alluded to something that's been on my mind for several years, which is that every time we get to town meeting, that there seems to be at least one person who will get up, not representing obviously the group, but still expressing a view that compares us to other communities of similar size and compares the staffing of the department to the equivalent staffing that they have found in their independent research to similar departments. And when I was looking through the town manager's budget, where you have these charts laid out, and enabled me to think about it a lot, because you do very clearly lay out all of the functions for each of the staff people who are working in the department now, and all that you're doing. It's clearly, as you've just indicated, a lot. But it made me wonder whether those are activities that are similar to the activities performed in these other parallel communities that we're supposedly being compared with, and if those are being performed in those other communities, are they being performed by staff? Are they staff in the equivalent planning department? Are they being performed by outside consultants? Is there anything that can help us to understand this assertion that we constantly are being asked to look at of comparing us to Northampton or wherever?
Well, I'll let Jonathan answer the specific, but I think the specific questions about, for instance, comparable communities like Northampton is an interesting comparison. And I know that's been we've been brought up on the floor of town meeting before, but I guess one of the other pieces of that whole equation that I would emphasize is that over the last 4 years, and Sandy can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we as a town have shrunk by about 25% in terms of staffing, in terms of positions, or so. And we in this department have actually experienced that very directly with the loss of one administrative assistant and actually the complete loss of funding for one of the planners. It was through the creativity of a couple of staff members here that we actually pieced together the funding. This was before CDBG came over, to actually retain that wonderful staff person in those functions. Since then, we've consolidated the CDBG profile, $1 million grant, and all of the things that go with that, from seeking the grant, coordinating the public process to get the grant, and then administering all the social service components and the capital components of that $1 million grant under the same department, planning with virtually no expansion of staff. So we don't talk about, when we come to see the Finance Committee, I was struck by the fact that none of us mentioned dollars and cents in our comments or our discussion here, but we often don't mention that. We mention the product that comes out of this functional area, and I think we're optimists in our functional area. We tend to want to reach and extend. Following up on what Kay said, sometimes we probably need to be reminded that maybe we can't do that one more thing, even though a citizen committee or board wants us to do it. We're not very good at saying no. We say, yeah, boy, we would love to do an inventory of all the street trees in Amherst. That's a great idea. We have no funding and we have no staff to do it, but goodness, we went out and got $40,000 from a state DCR grant to do it, to hire a consultant. the consultant didn't do everything. Nate Malloy and Alan Snow did a lot of the work, and it took staff time to do it. We're not too good at saying, no, we can't do that when a citizen committee or board asks us. But talk a little bit more about the comparison, John.
We looked at this last year and I think the year before, and some of the communities that were being cited as communities that were larger, in many cases Worcester once was cited, but have many fewer staff, the difference principally is the form of governance, that there's vastly less public participation in the process of governing in those communities. And the decisions are made by a few people, hopefully most of the time they're elected or appointed citizens, but in many cases they're just those decisions, public policy decisions are made administratively. Amherst won't tolerate that. Amherst citizens want to be involved in the creation of the program and the decision making about it. Northampton is the closest of all the examples that we've had. They have actually a very comparable number of staff. If you take all of the kinds of staff we have scattered across different departments, some of which are named differently, they tend to have more part-time people, but when you add it all up, it's the same number of, approximately the same number of full-time equivalent staff to do the same kinds of things. I would say that in Northampton they have a stronger decision-making process, and they sometimes complain about it with their staff, and they have a mayoral form of government, and the mayor just decides. Sometimes there's a lot less talking about how and process involved in making a decision. And those are the differences. But again, the closest example that we have is Northampton, and they have approximately the same number of staff to cover approximately the same kinds of things that are done. I don't know that there's another community in Massachusetts that is like Amherst in any way. It's interesting. We keep, I'll just talk about that for just a second. I don't want to take too much of your time. But whenever we propose or involved with the planning, we're proposing new zoning or something else, people are always saying, well, find us another community in New England or in the country that's just like Amherst and show us how it works there. And the answer comes back as every time we look, there isn't any other community like Amherst. It's not that this is not exceptionalism. There isn't another basically rural community with a flagship campus of a state university with this many students in it. There just isn't. This is the largest in New England, and if we're going to compare apples with other kinds of crab apples, New England is the place you look. The next closest is Mansfield, Connecticut, and they have many fewer people. They don't have quite as many students, and it's a very different form of governance down there, and it's just not comparable. So the general answer is, in most cases, the other communities have a different form of governance, and that's what makes the difference in terms of the amount of staffing and effort that's involved in getting from a public policy idea to an end product with a project, and the amount of staff that are needed to do that.
Thank you. Jeff?
I think you people are the group to ask about the business improvement district. I must admit I don't know very much about it, but I do notice that we are budgeting $15,000 for it in the FY13 budget, and ultimately it will go up to as much as $30,000 a year. So I sort of want to know a little bit about it and what's the advantage for the town to be giving this district money.
I think you might actually get a better answer from Sandy than you would from me. I can attempt one if he'd like me to, but I think he might be able to better answer that.
Okay, I'm glad to. Yeah, partly because this initiative was really taken by John in the manager's office more so than by these departments. And I think the idea is that it is a collaborative effort with the businesses. Amherst College, UMass are both kicking in. The library has joined. And the idea is to try to promote downtown cultural activities, business opportunities, and so forth. I haven't seen there's a brochure that they have. I don't know if you've seen it. I think that might be the best thing to get you, that when they were putting the bid together, what some of their plans are. I don't know all of the things off the top of my head, frankly, but they do have a whole array of different kinds of activities that they see themselves doing over the next few years. Let me see what else. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think the best thing to do is get you more information from the materials that the bid has put out. We have one of the central roles that the town is playing. It's partly just because the way the law works, is that we actually send out the bills to the businesses and larger residents, the apartment buildings and so forth, that might be part of the bid. We just sent those up, mailed those out about a week and a half ago, so they're starting to trickle back in. They have a month to pay them, just almost like any other real estate bill. But the process has started, and that's part of the town's contribution, is to give in-kind services in the form of the labor that we can put together to do those kind of services.
In brief, just to augment that, it is the creation of a district by the property owners in that district, by a majority of the property owners in that district, in which they agree to tax themselves above and beyond any other taxation or fees or anything going on, just for the purposes of their participation in the district. And then annually they decide what to do with those funds. And there are a range of uses to which they can put them, all of which are intended to improve that business district in a variety of ways, whether those are capital programs, whether those are hiring people to sweep and clean and steam clean the sidewalks, create sign systems, create cultural events, whatever it is. There's a very wide range of activities that bids engage in. It's basically a district created by the people in it, the property owners themselves, and they all agree, with the majority of them, we're going to tax ourselves this much. The town's participation, as Sandy said, is to be sort of the treasurer for that, but that's what it is.
Okay.
And it's a private organization, right? It's not public in any way.
Yeah, it's made up of the property owners who are in it. Anybody that was defined, geographic boundaries were defined, everybody was given notice that they had the chance to opt out right at the beginning. If you don't opt out, then you're in. And then you get to vote on for board of directors. It's a 501c3 type organization. I don't know how the town vote gets counted that way, but we do participate on the board.
But what I was getting at, it's not a town organization. It's not a town committee.
It's not an arm of the town. No.
It's not an arm.
Oh no, it's established under state law.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
But it is a separate private entity. That's correct.
It's probably not governed by the open meeting law either.
I wouldn't think so.
And we will not be staffing.
That's right.
Right, they're supposed to hire their own staff,
Take them.
which I think will be great once they have somebody full-time there to do the promotion.
We'll go around the room, see if there are other questions. So there's one other question that I had, which was every year I've been nervous about what will we do as a community if CDBG doesn't continue. And I'm becoming more nervous, not because of our standing and size of community or our competitiveness in seeking grants, but because this is federal sourced funds. And we know the kinds of pressures that are on Congress and the administration to reduce funding. And this is one of those that you read about in the New York Times and is a threatened grant source. So it sort of gets to the question as to whether we have any contingency planning that we've engaged in as a community about what we would do if.
Yes, there is, as there was in FY12, there's $30,000 in the budget set aside as bridge funds should there be some sudden cessation of block grant funding. The way in which even the most draconian of budget cutting activities at the federal level have proceeded, they all have a sort of a sunset period. It's not all of a sudden they vote that day and those funds have just disappeared and so forth. There's always a year and a half or so forth for those running the program and those receiving the funds to adjust. And so we're anticipating that. There's already been some diminishment of block grant funds, in fact many millions of dollars, and that trickled through to us as a mini entitlement community of a reduction of about $100,000 to $200,000 in the amount that Amherst receives annually. And it's more likely, although I have no crystal ball, it's more likely that we would see more of that rather than the sudden cessation of all block grant funding. Block grant funding is a really fundamental underpinning for red states as well as blue states. So I don't, during the depths of the recession, everybody was deeply nervous about all of this. We think, knock wood, in fact knock old oak here, that we have, with the $30,000 as a contingency, we have covered what the range of possibility within FY13. In fact, if we get the next round of mini entitlement funds, that will carry us through and through that fiscal year. So we will have time to respond if something happens in the interim.
White oak.
White oak, that's right.
But if I could, it is noted in the planning section of the budget book that I believe it's about 130,000, in that range, 140. That if there was, or hopefully it's not when, but if there was a reduction, whether it would be part or all, clearly there was a decision made a few fiscal years ago that funding would essentially take the place of some of the funding that was at that time in our functional area. So that goes back to assuming more responsibilities. Before CDBG came over to our functional area, I was not involved in CDBG activities at all. Neither was Jonathan and some of the other staff. We took on those responsibilities, and part of the staff salaries in our functional area were then covered by CDBG, and those funds went to essentially fill other holes in the overall town budget. So it causes department heads to be to worry that if that happens, what is the plan B for the town? So, it continues to be a worry, and we will do everything we can, and we'll work with Sandy and John, and we try to keep them updated if we are hearing things. It not only covers salary, of course, that's one concern. It covers salary of staff doing all these wonderful programs, but it also, those reductions are spread across the social service component of the grant and the capital component of the grant. So there's those three areas that the grant funds. So it's a real concern, and we'll keep watching it and keep Sandy informed, and he will keep you informed as the fiscal year goes ahead. We will hear, Jonathan, on the next grant in July, I believe. And that will take us through, this is hard with the federal fiscal year.
Until we hear the next July.
Yeah, that takes us through fall 2013.
Yes.
So it spans 6 months into FY14, I believe.
Right.
Yeah.
Also, the FYs are offset 6 months.
Yeah.
So it makes for interesting bookkeeping to try.
Well,
And that is the grant that is being reduced to 900,000 from $1 million.
Right.
That's under summary of grant funding. You can see it's under 2012
Yeah.
CDBG. That's under review now by DHCD and their federal colleagues.
Okay,
One other question.
sure. Go.
One of your objectives for FY13 is rental, residential rental regulations, which would take a bylaw change, I assume, to require. And I didn't see any money in the budget for FY13 for implementing them. Presumably, it would get paid for by fees and
Yes.
inspections.
Yes.
But I'm assuming, since I don't see any money directly in the budget for that, that you're not anticipating implementing that in FY13.
Two things. One, it is anticipated that any program like that would largely pay for itself through fees and the rest of it. Additionally, because of the degree of change that would institute and the notion of trying to contact all of those who rent property in Amherst in a comprehensive and fair way, it is anticipated that we would be phasing in notification and implementation of regulations. We wouldn't be just handing out tickets the day after town meeting adopted the regulation. We would give much as when the students come back in the fall or in late January, the police are handing out warnings for a while. Well, people are, parking in the wrong places and so forth. While people get used to what the rules are, it would be the same principle. We would be doing that slowly and allowing people to figure out how it works.
There would presumably be some extra staff in this. I mean, if you're going to be having people register rental properties, or a lot of them, and keeping track of them and whether they pay, would require some additional administrative.
It's something we're looking at right now, Kay, as part of the Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods Initiative. And as Jonathan alluded to, we see this as rolling out in FY13, but it is with somewhere on the order of, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dave or Jonathan, 2,500 single-family homes that are rented. This is it's a very large process, and one that will take some years, and the whole notion that we can inspect those or apply a new bylaw to them immediately in FY13 is not realistic. It's going to be a gradual process of working collaboratively with landowners, with tenants, with realty companies, and with staff, both in police, fire, and zoning and health. So it's going to take a few years of cycle to get to the point where I don't know that specific goals that you're referring to. Was that under planning or?
Yes, it's under planning. No, it's under planning.
Under planning. So we may need to add a little definition to that, which is, or a little expanding that over a couple of year period, I guess is what I'm saying. It's not going to happen immediately in FY13.
The goal is set under planning. Because all of this is collaborative, it's not yet exactly clear which department is going to be doing this. It may be a separate set of folks. It may be out of the health department, which is where currently the rental registration regulations exist. We're looking at what other communities are doing.
Good questions. I just want to point out one thing, because I don't think we're going to get to it tonight and explain it, just for maybe try and do it as a 60-second explanation. There's a second item that we put on the agenda, which is entitled Information Required to Consider Recommendations on Zoning Articles. What happened at the last Finance Committee meeting is that after we kind of reviewed what happened at the fall town meeting and had a substantial discussion, because this committee had a very divided 4-3 vote on where we were on the one big zoning article that was controversial before town meeting. And the discussion then got onto the subject of how do we go about quantifying what the economic impact might be of proposed zoning changes, and what information that members of the committee would uniformly feel that they needed in order to have a full understanding of whether there's a financial impact or not, and then also the timing of the whole process, and the fact that you've, Jonathan, been very good about coming to our committee meetings frequently. However, before the planning board itself votes on the article, which in fact happened in the fall with that particular zoning article, and it then puts us in the squeeze for the amount of time that committee members might have to ask questions and get follow-up, and we have access to you, and you're very informative and very helpful, but we don't have access to members of the planning board itself or the zoning subcommittee. So there was a whole lot of process issues that came up, and I put it on the agenda with the thought that if that question were to come back today, that I didn't want to be trumping on the open meeting law by something that was just not even contemplated on the agenda. But I didn't think that we would have time, and we really don't, because I know you're very busy, and we also have the library director waiting to meet with us, and we'll meet with Public Works later. But this is a topic that, in a general sense, not specific to a particular zoning article, I think that this committee needs to continue to pursue. So I just wanted to explain that.
I think we can probably provide you with sort of general information, examples from other communities or sort of nationally, what kinds of economic impacts zoning can have. You understand that it doesn't always have an impact right away, and sometimes it can take years for it to have, particularly in Amherst, it can take years for it to have an impact. In terms of representatives of the planning board, the zoning subcommittee, we can certainly make sure that they're here when this committee is trying to make a determination about its vote or recommendation on a specific zoning article.
Well, thank you. I don't know if there's anybody else from our finance committee who wants to follow up on that, since I did open it up. I don't want to spend much time on it, but I certainly don't want to foreclose people from adding to what was already said. Okay, I think we can put that away for a later date, but wanted to know we had that discussion. If there's nothing else, we really appreciate your being here, and as I've said before, I think one of the things that's nice about being on the finance committee is it gives us the opportunity to really take a careful look at what the staff does for the citizens of the town whom we represent as a committee at the town meeting, and to really understand and therefore appreciate all that you do and how valuable that is, and then also to have that opportunity once a year, as we did tonight, to meet with you and ask questions and hear some more in person. So we just want to thank you all for all that you do.
Thank you very much. We're happy to be here, and if there are questions that the committee has following up, happy to answer them through Sandy. And if there are things that we can do to better communicate to town meeting, to citizens, what we do in our functional area, we've made some of those adjustments. We've taken some of the input you've given us in years past and done that through the org charts, through the committee outlines, and through the milestones and grants documents. So we're happy to make other improvements. We are very proud of the work we do. Thank you.
And thank you very much for doing that.
And braving the weather tonight too, really. I mean, another horrendous snowstorm. We're just kind of,
it's brutal out there. We're going to sleep over. The roads are bad.
Especially the parking lot.
The stretch code?
See ya.
Yes. January 1st.
let's see, I know
Did you see her up
well. Yes, she's, yeah, just, see.
What?
So I can look
I
at
just took a shower.
you, so I can see you.
I still like trimming trees.
What's that?
So what we're doing right now for people who are home is that we're just waiting for the next segment of the agenda, which is going to be the library. So Sharon, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
There's maybe a few members of the committee who you have not met before, and so I think that I know you've met at least three of us.
Yes.
If not four. So maybe we'll just go around the room real quickly.
Bob Saul.
I've met you somewhere.
Yep.
Nice to meet you. Hello.
Janice Ratner, we've met.
Kay Moran, we've met.
Yeah.
You know me.
Yeah. And,
Doug Slaughter.
Mary Talman.
Nice to meet you.
Anurag Sharma.
Hello there.
welcome, and appreciate your being here this evening to talk about the budget proposal, and also the budget proposal, something that you did very well in the budget document itself, and I think is very valuable and very appreciated, which is to talk about the library and how important it is to the community and the goals of the library. So I appreciate that on behalf of the committee, and I think what we usually like to do is start by asking you to make a brief presentation, if you're willing to do so, about what you see as the highlights of what it is that you have to present, and then we'll turn it over for questions.
Sounds great. The trustees were able to approve this document last night, so I have the final draft here. I have copies for everybody.
Thank you.
So a couple of the numbers changed a little bit since the BCG, but the gist of it is the same.
It's amazing. There have only been 6 directors.
I know. My first day I found that out, and I was, really, it's quite the honor.
It's part of the history.
Okay. So, I'm here to ask you for a 2.8% increase. I'm going to tell you why that's not enough money. And then I will tell you what would happen if we were given less than a 2.8% increase. And I'm going to start with what would happen if we were given less than the 2.8% increase, and basically that would affect personnel. This is the only thing that the town is covering the cost of, and so loss of personnel would mean ultimately loss of open hours. Most likely nights and weekends is what I'm thinking, and I haven't analyzed the numbers. I haven't talked about that, those specifics with the board, but that's basically what that would mean. In a nutshell, there is no fluff in our budget. Our reserves have been spent. Everybody's budgets have been cut over this past several years. So in essence, the library really has no stabilization fund anymore, and it's kind of a scary position to be in. I'm going to start on page 3 of the document. On page 3, you can see our vision, our mission, and our goals. And I'm going to point out goal number 6, which is really, from my point of view, my number 1 priority, which is expanding funding sources and reducing operating costs without affecting services. You can also see our key objectives, and the 2 that I would like to point out are to increase and restore the library's materials budget and hours open for service to the public. And the second is seeking new public and private partnerships that will expand the library's budget. So in a nutshell, I'm looking for more money. On page 4, you will see a list of accomplishments, which includes hiring me, as you mentioned, and a list of our current challenges. And I would like to point out 2 of these. First are the safety and security issues, We are located in a very large building with many nooks and crannies. It was built as a library, but it looks like a house. People treat the library building as their living room. You know, that it's what it looks like, and that's wonderful. I want them to feel like it's their living room. But people forget that it is a public building that sees 800 people per day, complete strangers. We have several bathrooms, several entrances and exits. So we're trying to make the building more safe for the public, for the staff, for the items that are in the building, and so we're working with the police on these issues. And second, the other current challenge I want to point out is the fact that less than half of the trustees' annual fund goal of $85,000 has been met. So we've just taken in a little over $33,000 this year. And what we raise in this year's annual fund is spent next year. So we were hoping for 85, and right now we're only up to 33. On page 5 of the document, you'll see a chart which shows the value of the library services to the town, as well as the surrounding towns. So for example, in FY11, we circulated, if you take the top line, we circulated over 186,000 adult books. So if patrons were to have purchased these on their own at a cost of $17 a book, they would have had to spend over $3 million. So you take that chart all the way down to the bottom, and when all is said and done, the total value of our services in FY11 was over $8.2 million. In return, the town only had to appropriate $1.6 million. So in other words, I'm just saying that funding the library is an excellent use of tax dollars. On page 6, you'll see several graphs which compare the Jones circulation to other libraries, other public libraries. These are in Western Mass, within the same population group. So those towns are Agawam, Holyoke, Northampton, Pittsfield, West Springfield, and Westfield. And as you'll see, Amherst is #1 in 4 out of these 5 graphs. And we're very proud of this. Library patrons have a lot of choices. We're relatively close, you know, every town has their own library, and because of the internet, it really very much equalizes libraries. So, you know, 10 years ago, a bigger library would have more resources, bigger reference departments, and they could provide more services than a smaller library. It's not really the same case anymore. But so regardless, we are surrounded by a lot of excellent small libraries, but people are choosing to come to us. The blue graph. I put this graph together, and I wanted to show you that I wasn't just picking the charts where Amherst was tops, and so I felt that this really gave my numbers validity. But at the same time, I wanted to know why Amherst was not #1 in the circulation per hour. I wanted to know what I could do to fix that. And the reality is the Forbes has a branch, the Lilly Library, but they're not really a branch technically. They get to report their state aid figures separately, which means their hours are not added together. But the Jones, the branches do belong to us. So in essence, we have to report more open hours than they do. So that's the only reason why they're beating us the way they are. Okay, so on page 7, you get to the meat, you get to the numbers. You'll see our request. It's a 2.8% request, $1,690,789. That's in the green column, the 2.8% increase. Below that, highlighted in the peach, is our materials expenditure requirement. So next year, based on an appropriation of $1,690,789, we'll have to spend almost $186,000 on circulating materials. This number, this 2.8% increase, it does include funding the position of the ESL coordinator. I think that's been an issue in the past. I do fully support the importance of our English as a second language program. And it also, this number down here in green, the total FTEs, this represents the return of the adult services position to full-time. We have not hired this new person yet. When the previous person was in this position, the position was originally a full-time position, 37.5 hours a week. And she had babies, she had a family, so she requested that the director allow her to drop down to 30 hours a week, and that's the way it's been for several years. And now she has moved on, and I have to hire somebody new, and I feel like this position is such an important position to the library that it really, I needed to add the extra 7.5 hours a week. So it's a full-time position. On page 8, you are going to see a breakdown of how the endowment funds are used. In the FY13 beginning balance column, for next year you're going to see that the trustees have approved a 5.4% spending rate, which means we'll get to withdraw $396,041 from the endowment. This is a 5% decrease from last year's draw of $406,504. The spending rate is slightly decreased. It's still the 5.4%, but last year the trustees added an additional $10,000. This year they did not add the additional $10,000. So the rate has gone down a little bit. Andy had asked me what a 4% spending rate would be if that's what the trustees had adopted, and that would have equaled $293,364. So that would have been a 28% cut from FY12 if the trustees had voted that. I'm happy to say that they didn't.
Could you repeat those numbers?
Yes, absolutely. So the 4% rate would have been $293,364, which is a 28% cut. Then down at the bottom of this page, you'll see our other sources of income and what we spend. So state aid, we spend entirely on the part-time temporary salaries line. The annual fund, we spend on circulating materials, operations, utilities, building and vehicle maintenance. The Friends is circulating materials and programming, and then the donations, grants, and reserves, that's materials, operations, and programming as well. No matter, I guess what's important to keep in mind is these pieces of the puzzle are their anticipated sources of income. No matter what we take in, every last drop will be spent. I'm planning nothing new. I'm really at this point just trying to coast. I think in previous years we've had money left over in the state aid account, which has helped fund when budgets got cut as years went along. But for this year, we'll spend every last drop of that $60,000. I think, and I've only been here 4 months, and so I'm really, until I get a full fiscal year under my belt, I'm still trying to learn how the income flows in the library. And as you'll see, so this chart does show the 26% decrease in the annual fund. On page 9, there's a list of why we consider the 2.8% increase a negative. I don't mean to complain too much because this is the first time I've seen an increase in any library budget in many, many years. So I'm very happy about that. But the problem is 2.8% isn't enough to cover the cost of the employee steps and COLAs. So where you can see this in action goes back to Andy's question. If you go back to page 7, where you're going to see this is the part-time temporary line. In FY10, there was $106,000 in it, generally, almost 107. And for FY13, we're looking at 24.
I'm sorry, where are you?
That's on page 7, I'm sorry. So look at the part-time temporary line. It's the third line down. So we've gone from 106,000 in that line down to 24 for next year. And the reason is that's my one line. It's basically, I figure out all of the other lines, and then I subtracted from the 2.8%, and I got the $24,000. The state aid award, we're hoping, will be $63,000. So that will cover much of the difference, but I'm still short by about $13,000. How I'm hoping to cover that is by cross-training staff. I'd like to try and rely less heavily on fill-ins and to be utilizing the staff that are in the building when people are sick or go on vacation and things like that. Andy had asked me what other options were. quite frankly, I had to stick to the 2.8% bottom line. So it's only staff. So if I left if I increased the temporary line, then that would have meant that I would have had to lay off a permanent staff member. So the money had to come from somewhere, and that's the line that it came from. If you move on to page 10, sorry for jumping around. Again, this sheet is talking about how our outside funding sources are anticipated; they're not guaranteed. On this page, you will see the chart between FY12 and FY13, how I pay for the materials. Again, the town doesn't fund our book budget. So in FY12, I have to spend $184,000. For FY13, I will have to spend $186,000. And you can see the breakdown. The endowment in FY12 is going to fork over $151. Next year, I'll only be able to fund $126 out of it, and down the line. Let's see. And then, so the comment down below, comment number 5, it shows that we will be working with about $67,000 less in FY13 than what we had in FY10. And again, it's just, it's the same thing everywhere. We've got less in state aid, we've got less coming from the town, we've got less being donated to the library. People just donating fewer. There's less money available, so that's why there's less money available to the library. That's really, other than page 11 is how we work with other town departments, how they help us and how we help them. That's really everything.
I have a question. First of all, you said we're getting less money from the town. You're actually getting more money from the town. And last year, the library got a 7-something% increase.
6.8.
6.8. There's a much bigger increase than the rest of the budget's got. But my question has to do with, perhaps not directly related to the operating budget, but there's this Woodbury Fund, and I wonder if there's any progress on actually spending some of that for renovations, which I think was an initial idea.
Yeah, we're still working on it. I've been working with the town's Chris Bakunis, the town's IT department. We have met with 3 different vendors, and we have 1 quote from 1 company, and I still have 2 more quotes coming in from the other company, and that's in regards to the technology piece. So once I have those 3 bids, I will bring that to the Woodbury committee, and then we'll choose a package, and then that will eventually go to the trustees for their approval. And I'm not sure what the timeline is yet. I'm still waiting for the bids to come back.
So this is I'm sorry, maybe
Yeah.
just to follow up. It's actually private funds that the John's Library Inc. has, so we don't have any control over it. But I had not heard about a technology project for it. The last I heard was that there was a plan to renovate the large meeting room.
Yes, and that's what it is. But there's a technology piece to it. Okay. And again, because I haven't seen the bids, I'm not sure what the breakdown is of the money. The Friends have allocated a certain chunk of money. A part of that will go towards carpet and chairs and paint and lighting and that kind of thing. And the other part is the technology piece. And I think I could be wrong, but I think that's what they were waiting for from the director, to see what the needs were for the room. So that'll be the final piece.
The 33,000 donations versus the 85. Is there a way to project what that end number will be, just the way the arc of those donations happen? I mean, are you pretty much baked in the pie? You're going to fall short, but it's not going to be just 33. I mean, Sharma's going to write a check for 1,000 when he goes home today.
I love that.
We'll be matching with Bob's.
I'll take it home. We're pretty close to the end. The letter went out later than normal this year because the trustees were busy hiring a director, and then I was new. So it's just, last year was a rough year for the library. So next year we'll do it sooner, which I think will help because people will want to donate for taxes, to get it in before the end of the year. So we're going to send out another mailing sometime in the next month, kind of like a little reminder note. I would bet the farm on the fact that we're not going to hit the 85. I would be shocked if we made 50.
That's a big fall off. It's substantial. I guess, and the other question is, on page 8, yellow box 6, when you look at those donations, grants, reserves, etc., this is running down the reserves that you talked about. What accounts for that diminishment?
You know, I think one of the problems, and again, because I haven't been here that long, I'm not exactly sure. I think one of the things is, so this would be where the grants would fall into place. We've lost 2 key staff members in the past couple of years, so grants just aren't being applied for right now. So there's a chunk right there. And again, the donations piece, it's not happening. Those are the only 2 reasons that I can think of.
Questions?
Just a clarification. You said your spending rate is 5.4% when the recommended one is 4%.
The investors are saying that we should be, in an ideal world, we would only be going the 4%. And I think the goal is to get there over time. And one of the things the trustees want to do is, now that they've got a director and now that the budget request has been submitted, I think they want to take the summer to really to have a plan in place. They haven't had the opportunity to do that yet. So it's in the works. We need to figure out how to get down to that 4%.
Has this been, last year was 5.4% again?
Yes.
So has this been about 5+% for several years now?
I don't know what the percentage was for 10 and 11.
Higher than that. So is and what's the size of the endowment now?
What's the size of what?
Endowment?
Oh.
You can do that in your head. Come on. Isn't it about 8 million?
I thought it was 6 something.
I think that's where it bottomed out, but I think it bounced back to 6 and then it.
So you're going to divide 396 by 0.054?
See, I think it's at 7 something, but they gave us this big chart, and I can picture a couple of the numbers on the chart, and there's the trailing 12-quarter average, and that's the 7. So, but I'm not sure.
Well, it should be, if you divide 396 by 5.4, it's approximately $8 million.
8 million?
That's what Bob's saying. That's what these are Bob's numbers. Okay. So.
That's certainly the neighborhood.
Okay, so is that, so you are depleting this by drawing on it. Is there money added to it every year as well?
Yes, and we just met with New England Capital last night at the trustee meeting, and a couple of the trustees were very worried that we were dipping into the principal at this rate, and he said, no, we're not. And he had proof, and I can get you the proof if you want.
Okay.
But he gave us this chart, and he explained that even though we're taking out the 5.4%, we're still not overspending. We're not growing like we would like to be, and in order to do that, we would have to be down to the 4% rate.
So is that number, so total town appropriation is about 1.6 mil, and this is about $400,000. So is that a ratio you like to keep, about 1/4 of the town? Is there a ratio, is there a number that you try to manage in terms of how much you draw down?
Honestly, I've only been here for 3 months, so I was told to go for the 2.8%, and that's what I did. Maybe next year I'll be more creative, but for now I just wanted to.
Okay.
Well, I guess that gives me an opportunity just to say how refreshing what we've just seen is relative to the past budget process, which has ranged from having all the trustees coming in with placards saying more for the library, and this is just a very professional, request meeting the budget guidelines, and it's very refreshing that way.
Thank you very much.
To go a little bit further on the endowment, it's very complex subject, and Bob, you've been watching it more closely over the last few years. I think the rest of us, because you've been liaison for the last several years before this year to the trustees. Our library is very fortunate through Jones Inc., which is its own entity, to have this endowment, and the endowment to provide a way to have a steady source of additional revenue above and beyond what the town can give, whether it's enough to meet the MAR requirement, or as it was last year and a little bit this year, slightly above. But as with any endowment, you have sort of cross purposes of wanting to maximize what you do for the library and wanting to protect the future, and what can be done for the library in perpetuity. And you also have the problems that any endowment has when market hits a rough patch and the investments are at risk or don't do as well. Endowments have problems, and I think that's what happened, that it was sort of working at that higher rate, above 5.4%. Well, it was great when markets were booming in the last decade, and this decade it hasn't worked out so well. And it's unfortunate that that happens at the same time that the town itself becomes squeezed for what revenues it has to give to all of the functions, schools, library, and splurting police department, and maintaining the roads and everything else. So it is a very complicated subject. The 4%, it isn't our role to second guess the decision to go to try and achieve a 4% rate. I suppose that the 4% rate, whether it's appropriate or not, ends up depending upon whether the stock market comes back into the boom days that it had when that higher rate worked out 10 years ago or not. Responsible people are elected to the trustees to make this very difficult decision, and that's what they do. So that's the only other thing I can add as far as sort of personal reflections on the endowment question. Okay.
Just one thing on your charts on page 6, the comparison charts. Is it, I think I understood you to say that the Northampton line is just for Forbes? Yes. All of the lines, just Forbes. Because the Lilly Library has additional circulation, and the city also pays for that. So I think, I ran into this several years ago. I used to be the liaison too, and trying to look at Northampton compared to Amherst, because the state, on all those charts, it has Forbes and Lilly listed separately. So it's kind of hard.
But at this point, it's just something I think we have to recognize. Chance?
So does this also apply to the benefit numbers? Because I noticed quite a few of those increases were substantial.
So where were you looking for, if you could just point one out to me.
Some of the employee benefit lines.
You're like looking on page 69 at...
Page 73.
Okay, all right.
And quite a few of them, as I was reading through it, had, like this one's 8.4%. For the same number of employees for employee benefits on page 73.
Right. I can tell you that our overall health insurance budget went up, and you'll get it when we get the employee benefits, by 2.7%. Even though we haven't raised the rates this year, and that was mostly because more people are taking health insurance than have in the past. So that, frankly, just a few more people taking it can make that much difference. And then when you're looking at something like Public Works Administration on page 69, or well, highway would be a little bit different because there are more people there, but these administrative offices, when there are relatively few people, if you have a new person coming on taking insurance that didn't before, or a couple of changes like that, it can have a big difference on a percentage basis. I think that's mostly what's going on. Overall, there should be other areas where it's going down because, as I say, the overall increase was 2.7%.
Bob?
I have two conflicting statements. Every time I look at the Public Works budget, I'm amazed at how small it is relative to how many things you guys have to do. Now the other one, which is, when do you decide, or why do you decide with a project like the parking lot not to contract that out as a discrete project to a Duffy and Willard type of organization?
Okay. First answer is there is another $120,000 that isn't shown here. And when you look in the highway line, it shows you that 4 employees are funded through the capital projects that we do. That's what you're talking about. So there's $120,000 we start off every year. Well, we have since, I can't say every year, since 2005, or we've been on 120 in the hole every year when we start. And we decide what projects to do based on what's available and the climate that's out there for bidding. The Spring Street parking lot was we decided to do that about 5 years ago. So 5 years ago, the bidding climate was a little different than it was 2 years ago. And we actually probably would have come a little closer to having if we bid the project out, we would have come a little closer to having better bids, or more favorable bids to the town if we had bid it last year. We got excellent bids on the resurfacing project. One of the reasons for that was the climate was very poor. No one else was doing anything. You had one town that was offering $4 million worth of work, so the contractor was like, I'd like to have $4 million in my pocket, and he bid very low. So the decision is made actually sometimes very late or very early before the project's even started. So we were kind of locked into that. And actually no one was expecting the downturn, so we were kind of expecting that to continue on. We'll start to shift back, hopefully, to being tax supported a little more for that $120,000, which is one of our requests, and it's on the town manager's funding if he gets extra money. We will also shift back into funding more of the Chapter 90 type projects, which is crack sealing and those types of things, which we can do and do much easier and much quicker and much more cost effective than having to pay a contractor for in those cases. So we do have to watch it, and we do try to watch it, and we try to make sure we balance it out.
So I've never really understand that 4 employees circumstance. The 120,000 essentially funds those 4 employees, and those 4 employees, if there aren't projects that come up that require that, they basically would be let go.
Yes.
But it's in some sense it's a just-in-time game to get them to keep them going from year to year.
The reason, yes, how this all came about was we were asked to cut 2 employees back in 2003. So we said, okay, instead of cutting 2 employees, we'll do some more. We'll just concentrate more on the bigger projects, because we actually had a backlog of projects that we weren't getting done. And at the time, the bids, we couldn't get people to bid on our little projects because they were so small. No one wanted to waste their time. There was plenty of people spending money, plenty of people building big things, and a contractor could get a nice big job. So we took some of that money and we put it towards the employees. We need the employees for plowing snow, or else we have to add money to the snow budget to contract snow removal. So that was the linchpin that actually helped us make this decision. So we could cut from highway, but then we have to add to the snow budget, or we could just figure out a creative way to keep people employed year round, so if snow and everything was taken care of. Then we were asked a year later to cut 2 more people, and when we did that, that's how we got to 120. and that was too much. That was too much of a cut. But we still need all those people for snow plowing in the winter and that type of thing is why it came out that way.
So let me understand. So are those 4 people then doing mostly snow plowing and things like that? Or?
In the winter, we were always working on snow stuff, except this winter we had a lot of construction we're cleaning up and a lot of things we were cleaning up. And then in the summer, 8 people have to work on projects to pay for 4 people because you only have a 6-month, 8-month construction window, and you had a 4 to 6 month winter window, and that's how it's very. If I confuse you, I can try again one more time.
It's okay.
And if I may, it's basically there's 8 staff, and 4 of them are funded. 4 FTEs are funded in the general fund, and 4 are funded through projects. But the work actually gets done by all 8. And in the wintertime, it's the money that was appropriated through the general fund, and in the summer when those people are working, it's the money that came out of the projects. It's the way to think about it.
Thank you.
But you said 8. I'm sorry, I'm not really following this because why is there number 13 here? Positions full-time 13.
Oh, there are more than 8. That was just the example.
That's just, yeah, the other
okay.
6 are fully funded.
Okay. I think.
That's just for the construction
That's-
projects. The 4 and 4 combo is required because of the 6-month building season. I guess that's just the way it comes out.
That's to balance it out.
Yeah.
And those numbers are reflected in the construction maintenance budget. The people are construction maintenance, or what we call highway.
Janice?
What is the capital outlay? Oh, wait a minute. The capital appropriation on page 69, 25,000 up from 5,000.
It's 20,000 additional, and that's for some changes in the actual facility, the barn facility. There's some small changes that fall below the joint capital planning threshold, and that's what that is, I believe. We had a list of small items.
I had a question on the tree and ground maintenance, which for everyone's pages 80 and 81. Are there, I know you're doing some work, I gather, for the schools, because you said, are you doing work for the regional schools or just the elementary schools?
The tree and grounds,
Yeah.
we do work for all the schools, yes, regional and the town schools.
And because the region is a separate entity, it causes me to ask the question as to whether there's any compensation that comes from the region for providing maintenance to the separate entity.
The region does not pay for our time, our equipment, or our fuel. If we need to do something like reseed a field or fertilize a field, they'll pay for the material that go into that, but they do not compensate us for our time and equipment. This is something that has been discussed many times at the town manager level and finance director level before Sandy got here, and it comes back to agreements that have been in place since before I was here about who pays for what. We provide this service, Leisure Services gets to use school facilities and aren't charged for those. The town gets to use the middle school auditorium for town meeting, and the town's not charged for that. There's these unwritten agreements that were made many years ago that kind of control this, and that's why it's done that way.
On the long range objectives on page 80, and this is sort of a follow-up, you said to work with public schools and LSSC to develop a consolidated outside maintenance group is a long-term objective. What is the long-term, what is an outside maintenance group, and how would that affect the prior question I had posed?
There actually are people who do outside maintenance for the regional school system. They take some of their school bus drivers and facility people, and they actually do maintenance around some of the schools. It's mostly minor maintenance, minor mowing and trimming of brush bushes and so forth. Leisure Services actually hires 2 people every year to do softball field maintenance, and they hire some additional people to do some field maintenance for lining fields for some of the programs. So in reality, there's 3 groups of people who can be out there maintaining the same field during the day.
Okay.
On page 73 on the highway, it says that the purchase of services includes $24,000 for traffic line painting. We had money in the capital budget last year for a line painting machine. Has that not been purchased yet?
It has not been purchased yet. One of the people who passed away was actually our line painting person, and we're in the middle of redoing that whole group in highway and trying to figure out how we're going to handle this. So we left the line painting number exactly the same as it was last year for contract line painting. We still have to paint, we just have to figure out and replace people so we can get things working again.
Any questions on the Public Works budget? Don't see any. Because if not, then we have 3 enterprise funds that you oversee, water, sewer, and solid waste. So, bring our attention to those. I think there's traditional water because it fits as in blue paper. Started at page 123.
I always start with the clean water first and go to the dirty water.
Which is, so it's yellow.
We're on TV.
So in the water fund this year, there is a slight decrease overall, and that decrease is 8.5.
What page are you on?
Page 127.
They were serious.
You're blue.
Got it. Thank you.
And this decrease is mostly because of capital and bonding changes. We paid off one of our bonds for Atkins. Actually, we paid off the bond for Atkins. And we had some capital outlays this year, which we're not going to renew for next year. So that's why we have the decrease. The functional area is getting ready to go into a major construction project with the upgrade of Centennial Water Treatment Plant. And that was a $4 million bond that was approved last town meeting, the fall town meeting. Because of that and because of the debt service over the next few years, we are recommending that there's a 10-cent rate increase in the water this year. It's going from $3.30 a unit to $3.40 a unit in water.
I think the select board has voted that already, haven't they?
Yes.
Which means that you're anticipating looking ahead to 14, even though we're a long way from getting there, that we'd be starting to pay back the bonds in 14, and that number would therefore increase, and this is to prepare us for that by building up some funds, starting to build up some funds in the fund.
Yes, we do not want to get below we usually keep around $1 million in our reserve account for unusual circumstances that might happen, and we don't want to deplete that. So the 10 cents will keep us in that range and still allow us to pay off the capital bonding. Other than that, there really are no changes in water. Things are going quite well in water, and we survived the October snowstorm, which was an amazing water juggling act because we had water plants going offline and online, and power would come on in one place and things would stop in another place. I've always said this is a complicated system, but we found out how complicated it was during the October snowstorm when we had 6 days of trying to juggle different plants and make sure we had water everywhere. And fortunately, we only lost water in a very small section of the system in Pelham, and that's the only place we lost our water system.
Wow.
I appreciate all your department and went through to keep this town up and running during that period. And since as the cleanup has gone on, it's my understanding that there was also some crossover problems between wastewater and the water fund, because somebody told me something about the wastewater plant couldn't draw water away, so that affected what we could do on the water production side.
Oh no. We had problems on the wastewater side too. We ran on generators on the wastewater side for 7 days as well. The problem on the wastewater side was we couldn't push this. We have 16 wastewater pump stations, and we couldn't pump all the wastewater out of the pump stations and get it to the wastewater plant. So sometimes we weren't pumping the product fast enough to get to the plant to be treated. So
I'm going to ask you a question about water sales this year. I noticed the revenue is down a little bit. Have you noticed that we're selling fewer
yes,
gallons?
we're down in revenue, and most of that is because of wet year is what we think. When we have a wet year, we definitely have less water that we're selling. We also found we were metering wrong in one of our main plants, so we're actually producing less than we actually always were producing less than we thought we were. So some of the numbers you see in production is the fact that we're actually kind of better meter, accurately reading things. So a little bit of that is wet weather, which we always anticipate, and then a little bit of it is we're actually monitoring and recording what we're producing better.
Anything else on water?
It really was amazing the way that water system stayed on throughout that.
I know.
Jeez. Thank
Incredible.
goodness.
Yeah. Jeez.
We had one town call us up, Royalston. They called us up and said, "Do you have a generator? Do you have anything?" And we're like, "Yeah, we can get you one. We're getting ready to get rid of one of ours, and we'll send it to you." And we got it up there, and they had 5 feet of water left in the tank for their community.
Oh God.
So some people just ran totally out of water, and it was amazing. We just kept it going. It was amazing.
So turning to the sewer fund.
So the sewer fund is on page 141, and they're gold pages.
That's a nice description.
If you go on a cruise ship, you'll see that all the sewer piping in the cruise ship is painted gold.
That's good to know. Good to know.
So
How do you know that?
I was on a ship for a while. In the sewer fund, we have a 5.9% increase in the account this year. We're proposing. The majority of that is actually coming from the fact that we're doing the master sewer expansion, we're calling it, which is Harkness Road and Amherst Woods sewer expansion. This is to pay for some of the work we've already started doing. Involved in this too is a 10-cent rate increase. We're proposing going from $3.35 a unit to $3.45 a unit. And that's also to get ready for the bigger bonding rates bonding charges that are coming in the future, which will start next year. Not much has changed there. Our biggest, because the capital for the enterprise system is in here as well, we do have a big outlay. We have to replace our Vector truck, which is a very important piece of equipment. And that's a $380,000 expense, and that helps with raising our expenditures this year.
Where is that on this?
It's on page 153. The Vector truck is the big truck, orange truck you see driving around town with the tank and the big hose in the front. And that's used to clear blockages in the sewer system and to clean the sewer system so that we don't have blockages and backup in people's houses.
How old is that truck? Sorry, Andy.
Go ahead.
How old is that truck?
It's about 18 years old.
Looks good.
Did you say 8 or 18?
18.
Okay.
So you're replacing it?
We're replacing the entire truck. We've replaced the fan unit, which is the part that creates the suction to draw to clean out some of the manholes and catch basins. We replaced that 4 times already in the life of the truck.
Is factor a word? Or
It's a brand.
brand.
You can Google it.
I was hoping it was a word, so that I worked into conversation. Well, yeah, we're gonna back to that. Yep.
What are the plans for sewer in the rest of the town? Is that gonna happen? Some of my neighbors who know I'm on the finance committee think I have a lot of power. And they want to know when our neighborhood is gonna be sewered.
What's your neighborhood?
South Amherst. It's past the sewer.
Oh, okay. I do know the way we are set up now is we're doing Harkness Road and Wildflower, and that's a 3-year project starting next year, or starting this year, so 3 years. So probably in a year or two, we'll start talking again about, do we want to expand into the other sections on the report? So I don't think, we have not made any decisions, so it's still up in the air about what we'll do next.
Because sometimes you do smell sewage if it's very wet, if you're walking around the neighborhood.
Yeah. Do you live in Elf Hill?
Mm. And it is on the aquifer, as people keep pointing out.
Yes, and that's actually not that bad. We do not have any, we do monitor the aquifers, and we do, one of the positions we funded last year, the environmental scientist, we do a very good job now, and she's actually been able to compose a lot of the data and put it together in a much more usable format. And we have no phosphorus hits and no nitrogen hits in the aquifer that can be attributed to leaking septic systems anywhere in town. That's over the aquifer.
Anything else?
May I just ask you a question? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand this. On page 141, there's a line item surplus funds. And what is that? Where is that coming from?
That's the 141?
Yeah.
That is what we have to keep in our undesignated fund balance. It's money that has not been...
It's like using free cash.
Yeah, it's free cash, basically.
So
It's drawing down your reserves or surplus to help fund the operating budget.
The water and the wastewater and all the enterprise funds have a free cash balance, and we use that to balance our requests sometimes.
And so part of the reason, you'll see in the narrative description on page, find it on revenue. On page 143, it talks about the use of that, and that part of that is being used to offset the purchase of that Vector, because the Vector was such a big one-time hit that we're essentially matching that with taking money out of the reserves. They will be built up again over time because we are raising the rates.
it looks like, there's money coming out of the surplus funds as like, FY 10, 11, 12.
Yes, for whatever reason, there's been a history of doing that in this fund.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand it. I don't really have a question. I just have I'm not questioning it, but I have a question.
Well,
I think that, if I could just say one other thing, I know over time there's been an effort to moderate rate increases, and one way to do that is, in any particular year, instead of doing a rate increase year after year, if you sometimes do it every other year and instead draw down some of your surplus sometimes, so that I think there's been a history of going up a dime at a time on rate increases generally, and part of what you see with these use of the surplus, I believe is related to the timing issues around those increases and the magnitude of those increases.
Because in '09, we didn't use any surplus funds. So it's not every year we dip into the surplus.
Okay.
This is one of the things we were going to look at eventually, is a policy to add to the financial policies book on reserve funds and the enterprise funds, reserves and the enterprise funds. We do seem to have a sort of a policy, so.
I think it's a working policy of trying to keep $1 million in each of those funds, which is, well, it's almost 25% of the revenue if you in each of these funds in that range.
To have an explicit policy explaining why we would be keeping it in, eventually, in all your spare time. You could draft one so we can talk about it.
I think it's one of my goals for FY13 actually.
If we're taking 200,000 out every year, as we have been now, if we do this for 4 years in a row, we must be drawing down to a lower level.
Not necessarily, because it could be that we had greater revenue than was anticipated, and so it's filled in. If you look at what the levels are, they've actually stayed fairly consistent over time. So I think that in fact we've had greater revenue than was budgeted, so we've replenished the funds year after year.
When we set the budget for the sewer, we've in the past chose 90% of the water production. So you may see water numbers coming in lower than anticipated because it's set at 100% of what we think we're going to make for water. And then the sewer fund has always kind of been 10% less. So the sewer fund tends to actually grow a little more than you expect. We adjusted that a little more this year to make it more correct in what we anticipated. But in the past, it was just a flat water. This is what we produce in water. This is what we expect to sell in water. 90% of that's what we're going to do in sewer, and we're moving away from that. So
Okay.
So it's a question about the water fund. Can I go back to the water fund briefly?
Bristol water.
The
Yes.
clean water fund. In some earlier years, water consumption has decreased because of efficiency measures, conservation measures taken largely at the university. And that had the effect of raising water rates because less was being used, but you still needed the same amount of money to produce. Is that no longer a factor because the conservation measures are in place and so we're not getting new ones from our major users?
UMass is the biggest, like you said, and
their demand fairly consistent.
Their water consumption is leveled out.
Okay.
We expect actually to have an increase soon when the Honors College opens up, because that'll be another 1,600 room or beds added to the campus. So that'll pull the water use up a little more. We actually saw water use come up a little bit when the athletic facility, their new fitness center, as one of our favorite people in town calls it, the Death Star, opened up. Water consumption went up as well, which was good. We like that. So we've actually seen UMass level out, but UMass is, as there always are, they're looking at ways to conserve and reduce their costs. So they are looking at another round of some type of conservation efforts coming soon, and that may hit us again, and we may see their use drop again.
The other thing I would just mention going forward on back to sewer is because we are extending sewers, we looking to, in the future for rate increases and costs and so forth, we will be increasing our estimates for sewer usage because there'll be more people on the system and it'll bring more revenue in.
Yes.
And the plant itself has plenty of capacity still.
Yes. The plant was built for a regional system, to actually be a regional system for Pelham, Amherst, Hadley, and Sunderland, I believe, is what the original plan was. and we only do Amherst, so we do have quite a bit of capacity left at the plant.
Okay. Additional questions are, now we'll turn to solid waste and
Quick
yes,
question. I mean, how are these funds funded?
By rate, we charge the ratepayers. You get your water bill,
Yeah.
there's a water charge and a sewer charge, and it's based on water consumption, and that's what funds the actual, your water charge goes into the water fund, your sewer charge goes into the sewer fund.
There's a summary of all the revenue sources on page 143.
Okay.
I think I'll respond to that in part for people who are watching at home and Amherst media, because I think this is one of those things that is a difficult concept to understand at first. The town has 4 enterprise funds, the 3 we're talking about tonight, the one we'll talk about later in transportation. And what those are is essentially as if the town is running a business. And they are things that a municipality can do that are fee supported by the users of the system as opposed to supported by taxation. So, for example, as Sandy was just saying, water and sewer is easy to visualize because it's the water bills and the sewer bills that the users pay. And so it is a user-supported system, but it is still part of the town government. It's just becomes a separate budget because it is not, in fact, supported by taxation. And the one interrelationship, and Doug is our annual expert on this, is that there is a portion of each fund that is used to pay for a portion of the overhead of the town managers and finance staff because of the work that they have to do in maintaining the system and doing the billing and things of that nature. But these are freestanding funds. They are not a part of the general fund, and there is this whole specific set of state statutes that govern how enterprise funds can be set up and how enterprise funds, when they're appropriate, and how they can be used in the accounting that's required. And last thing is, you have a copy that you received on CD of the Association of Town Finance Committee handbook, and there's a very good section on enterprise funds in that book.
Okay.
Can we turn to solid waste? I think that this one, we really do need to talk about the question of the fund balance and what's happening with fund balance and the sustainability of the fund itself, because of the changes that have happened within solid waste. And just sort of start with that introduction because that might short circuit my asking questions later.
This is our troubled child. I guess you could call this our Cherry Hill, if you wanted to. Our solid waste fund started out as being a system which actually had a landfill, and we actually collected trash from all the trash collectors in town. We charged them for it, and we made a great deal of money, and we were able to support our solid waste system and to have neat little things like the transfer station, which had the trash which had the take it or leave it, had the book swap, and had a lot of free services at the transfer station or at the landfill at the time. In 2002, we closed the landfill. 2003, we switched over to a transfer system, and we have not been able to really match our prices up with our needs. We've tried different things to bring in more money. We went out for an RFP for a cell tower. The company that wanted to do it that fell apart after we awarded after we got ready to award. We tried to sell our gas credits for destroying methane gas, which is a greenhouse gas on the greenhouse gas market. But the greenhouse gas market collapsed with all the other markets in 2008. So when we were getting ready to sell, we had nothing to sell. And then our latest attempt to actually boost the revenues in the solid waste fund was the lease the old landfill for a solar facility, and that has not come to fruition yet. So we're in the process of looking hard at the whole operation. We have the solid waste committee, which is actually the recycling and waste management committee, is putting together a survey that'll go out soon, and we'll start surveying town people about what they think about the transfer station. Should we continue to operate a transfer station? Should we raise our prices so we can operate it? The prices right now are actually comparable to most places, with the exception of the access sticker to get into the transfer station. We charge $75 to get into the transfer station. Some of the communities around us charge up to $100 to access their transfer station. So we're actively engaging the public at this point, or shortly, to get the town's general feeling about what to do here. As you can see, we're down to $100,000 in our free cash, which is not good at all. So we have to make a decision. On top of the fact that we're not financially viable, we don't seem to be financially viable anymore, is that in the next 2 years, the solid waste picture in this area is going to change. Northampton is closing their landfill. South Hadley's applied for an expansion of their landfill, and they may get it, they may not get it. But if they do get it, it's only an expansion for probably 5 or 6 years. The landfills in Chicopee or the waste management landfills in Chicopee and South Hadley as well are slated to close soon. So in this general area, there's not going to be any place to take your trash conveniently. The only place that will probably remain open for trash is the incinerator in Springfield. So we're at a crossroads in solid waste. One, we have a system that isn't really working very well, and two, the disposal system in the region is changing. So what we've done is propose this budget is status quo for the year. We've had some good things happen in the budget. We've had one of our retirements as a long-term employee in this budget, so we've had some reduction in personnel costs, which is nice. So we're hoping to do one more year and have some way of either saving it, or we'll be at the point we have to say it's time to make this either a general fund expense or do away with it.
Looking out, see if anybody else has questions to follow up that rather sobering statement. One thing, and I don't know, Sandy, if you're the one who to ask this to, or Guilford, either one. You mentioned looking down the future at the solar array that would be placed there. It's my understanding that the income that we're likely to get from the negotiated agreement with the company, is Blue Waiver, is that they would be giving us credits or reduction in rates for electricity purchases for the town, and that we would also collect property taxation, which would then be on their equipment, the value of their equipment, which would be a general fund revenue. So I started thinking about those two. Then the question came up, where does that come to revenue into the solid waste fund?
It would then have to be an appropriation from the general fund to the solid waste fund to subsidize the fund. At one point there was, I think that's where we finally ended up is how it would have to work. I think early on in the solar project there was some thinking that it might have been done with charging rent to the to the solar company that's putting the equipment on. At the end of the day, there's X number of dollars that are sort of out there to have that company pay us. And the more we charge them things like property taxes and rent, the more they're going to charge us for the electricity. So basically, we're paying ourselves to pay those things off. And the model that I think we've seen around the state in terms of solar projects is that there's a nominal rent, $1 a year, and that's in fact what's in our agreement that we're negotiating now. And so I think what we would do is take some of that property tax revenue and redirect it back toward this fund if we want to keep the fund going. I think at the same time, of course, we really just have to look at whether it's a viable business to be in, to run a transfer station.
Huh?
If I'm reading it correctly, the shortfall is about $55,000 a year. It varies, I'm sure, but look, that's what it was, and so you're not that far off. It's basically 10% of your revenues, and I'm wondering if Northampton closes, the alternatives shrink, then you've got some pricing power, I would think, to increase your revenue side. Do you think you'd be able to close the gap that way?
I don't think so. We're actually, I mean, if you look at what we're actually taking in, which is on page 160, you'll see that our solid waste that we're taking in has been dropping over the last 5 years. What's holding us on is our construction and demolition, which we haven't been able to take to Northampton anyhow. It's always been going to South Hadley. So I'm not really sure that just that Northampton's closing will help us that much more. And you are correct. Our shortfall has been anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000, depending on what was going on that year. The good news on the solid waste side is that one, we've completed our comprehensive site surveys for both the old landfills. We actually know what our testing is. We have one more round of testing this year at the old landfill, and when that testing is done, we'll know what our monitoring program is for both landfills for probably the next 10 years, and we'll have a fixed cost that we won't fluctuate as much as it's been the last few years. Yeah. So some of our costs are coming down, so that is the good side, and most of that's from monitoring. The other thing about monitoring is if the transfer station or the solid waste fund does close, there still is expense in maintaining the two old landfills. We still have monitoring costs that's required by DEP. We still have maintenance costs on the leachate systems and the flare, and we still have to have some type of work going on to maintain what were the two landfills.
Okay.
And if we leave the transfer station open and people continue to bring waste there, and the landfills in this area close, we're going to have increased costs of getting that trash to some final resting place.
Well, won't we jack our fees up?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to cost all of us more, right?
Therefore, when was the last time fees went up?
The sticker fees went up last January, and the actual trash fees went up. The trash fees for your household trash went up a year ago, and we've actually adjusted the other fees for computers and stuff as the market changes. If the market starts charging us more on computers, we change the computer and electronic. Those fees change according to the market, but the trash fees went up a year ago.
A couple things. The thing is that whether people take trash to our transfer station and then it goes to somewhere else, or they contract with somebody who make it magically go somewhere else, if the local places close, all those costs rise. So whether we're doing it or not is those costs will rise just because the location of where the trash can be taken is going to go up. I know for me personally, the having a transfer station is very cost effective for me relative to having somebody come pick it up in my car. I mean, and part of that's because we do a lot of recycling, and I don't get charged the way I get charged for my trash. So I'm cautious about what goes into trash, which is the intent of the whole thing. So, and that may also need to be a factor people consider in this whole process, is that if your pricing structure is set up to encourage things like recycling, it's not as much so with curbside pickup by another company, and that is, yes, all the recycling's free, but it doesn't cost me any more than, if I have a contract that has 1 barrel or 3 barrels and it's the same price, then there's no incentive to recycle. So that's a factor to sort of put in the mix, is not as specifically financial cost, but an overall cost in the big picture of things. But anyway.
Mary Lou and Janice.
As the costs have risen, have you found more people dumping their trash along the roadside? Is that one of the things that happens?
Yes, it hasn't got to the very bad point in Amherst yet. I've worked in communities where every time you raise the rates at the landfill, you saw a proportional increase of trash on the road to the landfill. There is one community that's reporting that there's a section of town which is actually near the landfill, which they're seeing more trash dumped along their little section. But have we seen a large increase? Not yet.
Yes.
So when we have curbside pickup of trash, does it go through the Amherst transfer station, or does it just go somewhere else?
It goes someplace else. It depends on who you have for your hauler.
This is a really complicated problem.
Yes.
With all kinds of unintended consequences. You should have one of your PhD students work on this.
What do they teach?
Just to figure out what the ultimate consequences are. I have farms around Amherst, and I definitely see increased dumping in the last 2 years or so, just with people coming in. So we put up gates and that type of thing. But then you get that feeling, and just a general feeling that getting rid of garbage should cost more than it does. That it's an absolute bargain to get rid of garbage. That goes away in an increasingly crowded landscape, and that seems to be what's happening here in slow motion. And these landfills are closing. It's hard to permit new ones. Nobody wants it in their backyard, and so gradually there's a squeeze here. If South Hadley gets that extension, I think it'd be a very anomalous circumstance. So I don't know what the solution is long term. If you close the transfer station, then what happens?
Well, if we close a transfer station, what happens is that we have to enforce. There's 2 choices basically. Choice 1 is we have to then enforce the rules that the Board of Health has, which means everyone has to have a hauler, and you have to dispose of your trash with the hauler, which then means you're getting into the enforcement game. You're chasing down the people who are dumping on the side of the road, and you're trying to stop those people. The second option is that there's some type of town-wide trash system. We're not looking, and we've talked this over among our staff, and we don't want to have a trash division where we go out and have trucks and people that pick up your trash. That's not what we're leaning towards when we say that. We're talking about more the issue of the town would go back to a system they had many years ago where we contracted with different haulers, and we set up trash collection through private haulers in town. So instead of, if you live in Amherst Woods and you have Amherst Trucking, your neighbor has Amherst Waste, and the guy beside you has alternative recycling, instead of having 6 trash trucks come on trash day, you have 2 trucks come on trash day. And the town would oversee it and make sure there's still a cost because the town has to make sure everyone's paying their bills and with all the trash is picked up curbside. So that's one, those are the 3 options basically.
Other questions on discussion on solid waste?
So how many more years, sorry,
Hey, go ahead.
how many more years before we are at capacity?
Our landfill is closed. I guess the question is how many more years of revenue do we have? And at the rate we're spending down the free cash, we probably have
2 years.
2 years.
More years.
Philip?
What would happen with leaf dumping?
That would be the town would have to make a decision. I mean, is that one of the things we continue to do is have leaf dumping or leaf bag collection? Leaf bags is actually something the highway department does. The 2 collections of leaves we have every year, the highway department does it. They pick up the leaves, and the interesting thing is that we don't take the leaves at the transfer station when we collect them street side. They go directly to farmers and to different people who grow things in town. They take the leaves and they use them as compost. So all we do is move the leaves from your house to the farmer.
Additional questions? Guilford, thank you very much. This has been a very good discussion this evening and very informative and helpful on all aspects of what you do, which is an awful lot, and we appreciate all that you do.
Thank you, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask some more, because it is complicated.
It sure is.
Sure is.
Thank you for good luck with the solid waste.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's getting late, and I try not to have the meetings go this late, so I was trying to be prepared for that, and I think that most of the rest of the agenda, if there's no objections, could be put off next week. We have almost as bad a week, but because we have schools, elementary and region and public safety, but we don't have. It would be a little bit more contained than this one was. So if it's all right with everybody, considering that it's 20 of 10 at this point, I'd let most of it go. That I did want, till next week, I did want to do 2 things. One was to remind everybody that on Saturday, February 11th, is the next regional 4-town meeting. It's Saturday morning, and I will get a notice out probably in conjunction with the select board to make it a noticed meeting, but it's really the schools that arrange the meeting and run the meeting. But I wanted to remind you of it for your own personal planning.
Just to,
Yes.
for people to know, it starts at 8:30. We normally do it at 9. This time it will be 8:30 to 10:30.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful because I did not know that. So it's good to know. And the other thing is that I don't know if anybody wants to ask a question or two on this. I think that you probably, from various sources, including some of my emails, know that the governor's recommendation was not as generous or optimistic as Sandy's original projections were, and it's we are going to have to talk about that as a committee on how we will approach this as the process proceeds. It is a work in progress, and the next thing we will be interested in seeing is whether the first indications from the legislature are that they're going to do something different from the governor's recommendation, which is very possible. If they don't, then we have some hard questions to ask ourselves. There's another element to it, and that is, of course, that the governor's proposal comes in 2 parts, and one is really level funding from last year's recommended amount, and then there's the supplemental amount, which we did not last year use as annual budget appropriations, but we used part of it for various expenditures in the fall special town meeting, and some of it was placed into the stabilization fund. But how we're going going to look at a piece of money that we think is likely to come in and how to account for that. So there's some big policy issues. I think that to start this conversation, other than to alert you to them at 9:45, is probably not the time to do that justice. And but we are going to have to try and make sure that we fairly soon get some time to talk about that. I don't know if there's any quick questions on the subject. Yes?
Could we have this on next week's agenda before BCG meets? Because I'd kind of like to know what will be said there in terms of library has come in over the 2.8 or would like more than 2.8. Schools are having some difficulty, and I think maybe some caution at BCG, not knowing where we're going to be would be helpful, but might be nice to, at least for our rep, to do that.
You're not going to meet again before BCG meets.
Oh. Well, I was just kind of hoping, I'd like to know where our rep stands on
I think that the message that Mr. Saul and I will be delivering is that given where we're at, it would be unwise and impractical to dream of more than 2.8% overall, and the question that we're struggling with right now is whether we can even hold to delivering on the 2.8%, but that we have not had, we at this point as a committee have not had an opportunity to develop an analysis of that issue, and it's premature not knowing what the legislature is going to do. And I think that is just a statement of current policy of this committee. I don't think it takes us to vote because we've already done that when we established the guidelines. Bob?
Is there any way to translate the governor's number and percolate it down to what it means for us in real dollars and how it diminishes our...
I'm going to I'll hand this out. These are the cherry sheets. I emailed them to you.
Oh,
but they're, and I would just say that overall, because we didn't get the 2% increase, that's about $250,000 to us. And then if you look at the cherry sheets here, there's a loss of about another $80,000 because our assessments are up. Oh, these are preliminary estimates from the governor.
May I have a copy of that?
Sure. We have some work to do to delve into some of these numbers to see, particularly on some of the school-related ones. Rob Detweiler and I definitely need to do some work on that. We've had some conversations, but we need more. But that's...
Okay, that's the impact overall.
Yeah.
Or likely impact.
I'm sorry, could you say that again? I'm not sure I really understand, wrapping my head around it. So we were expecting the government's state aid, 2% increase in the two largest state aid accounts.
That would have accounted for about $250,000 more than...
And we are getting how much more from them?
We're getting zero more from those two accounts. They're level funded.
Okay.
So we're drawing a comparison against the projections from October and what we used in developing the guidelines. And the combination is that level funding versus the 2% is about $250,000. And then the cherry sheets also have assessments, which you'll see in the bottom or on the second page, that are charges to the town for certain things that are listed, and they're about $80,000 greater than was projected, so that the combination is that in comparison to where we thought we were on the October projections and the numbers we used in November in adopting the guidelines, the difference is around $330,000, and that's the reality we're talking about. Now, we don't know, as I say, what the legislature is going to do, but it does send out the reverse side of the message is that going above 2.8% is not a realistic possibility in Hancock.
So our guidance to the town departments and other places for 2.8% increase for this year was based on the assumption that we just talked about.
Correct.
And so are we going to put out a revised guidance or?
Well, that's the subject that we have to talk about, and that I don't think we're going to talk about tonight because of the lateness of the hour and because we really don't have the complete information that we do need to know. We do call the guidelines preliminary,
yes,
and our letter was very clear that these are preliminary, and as co-chair of BCG, I actually sent some of that warning back to the members of the BCG to remind them that the Finance Committee did point out the uncertainty about state funding and the impact that that has on the projections. So these are all topics that everybody's well aware of.
I'm sorry to belabor this point, the very last thing I'll say, but that the 320,000 that you tallied up in shortfall just
330
or 330, do we divide that over regional, elementary, town, library, the whole $65 million budget? So in kind of a gross way, it would drop from 2.8 to 2.3 or so as a gross number. I was just fiddling around with the numbers just to see what the impact would be.
Yeah, in ballpark, that's about right.
And of course, the reason that we need to talk about this on the 9th, I think, a little bit is that before we get to the Fort Town meeting on the 11th, we need to know what we're going to say when people go around the room and saying, can you still support the 2.8% that you talked about? And I asked a similar question of the other towns, and I think that that's where the crunch is on, that we have to be able to provide a response to that, and that's why I think that next week we do need to reserve some time to talk about it. I wanted to bring it up tonight, not for the purpose of discussing it, but to sort of prime your thinking so that you're ready for next week. So with that, at 9:50, if somebody made a motion to adjourn, I might
Second.
I just heard the motion passed, and we're adjourned at 9:50. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Amherst Media.